And greetings. Hope everyone can hear me. Let me know if the audio is good. Welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. And Patrick Alexander is here. And oh my goodness, Emory is here. Finally, brother. Nice to see you again. And Patrick, as always, great to see you, brother. And Paleologos, thank you for joining. And let me offer a prayer first for this stream. Heavenly Father, I offer this stream to your glory and the glory of Jesus Christ as we talk about the show that transpired on Dapper Dino's channel. Give me wisdom in speech and how to conduct this. May it be honoring, glorifying to you, and help me to equip your people. And give me wisdom in how I might conduct myself in future shows, because clearly I have to somehow convey that I disagree with some of the things that are said, and I don't quite know how to say that. And so give me the courage and grace to stand for you, but yet not offend the hosts. There's ways to disagree politely, and help me to do that. And Lord, just thank you for this day. Thank you for your people. In Jesus' name, amen. So I don't know how many of you have watched the Dapper Dino show that got concluded on his channel. It is a drinking show. I drink cranberry ginger ale, and so does Benthoven, no relation. He was the other guest. The only one that drinks alcohol there doing these shows is generally Dapper Dino. And so I just wanted to make that clear. I have a hard time drinking alcohol anyway. It tends to just make me sick. So, it's one of these things where I feel, to some extent, I mean, and some of you all can relate, especially those graduate students like Emory, and then, God willing, even Paleologos. When you go to school, you'll have professors and you'll have peers that are all like Dapper Dino, and you have to learn how to get along with them and yet keep your Christian witness, and then also learn and not out yourself. These are extremely difficult competing and conflicting constraints to try to navigate. And I'm not saying that we do it right all the time. We try. And I will say this, there are times when we have to stand up and maybe get expelled. On the other hand, we are there to learn, and I was on Dapper's channel to learn. And if people wonder what I'm trying to do here, just because an argument or person comes out in defense of creationism doesn't mean he's always right. And there's been a policy within the creationist communities: you don't criticize other creationists publicly. And I'm like, well, there are probably ways to do it, and you can be maybe sensitive and as diplomatic as possible. And then there are times you can, I'm tempted to just rip on someone bad, especially if I feel that he's disgraced the Christian faith by his personal conduct. Then I don't cut him so much slack. And I feel Kent Hovind is taking too much of airtime. And also, I need to point out, I mentioned this in my Dapper Dino. I was a guest co-host, which is a real honor. I was told I was the first young Earth creationist to be on one of these shows, and the people were very gracious to me and excited to see me. And so, there's a way to conduct yourself and say, I totally disagree, and yet you don't have to create any more conflict than is necessary. And that's my policy. Jesus said, there's a time when you'll be hated by all. And, I'm just grateful for the times and the situations when we're not experiencing that. I'll tell you that in Muslim lands, yeah, or some of these Hindu lands, you could expect to be hated by all in your, even your own family. So what happened tonight and the welcoming spirit I got, that is atypical, and we just have to thank God for every day that the other side will receive us. I happen to have this book, and I just found it in my bookshelf. It was by Mark Isaac, The Counter Creationism Handbook. And it's 300 pages, and it attempts to find counters to 300 pages to all these creationist arguments. And the reflexive tendency of creationists is just because a creationist has used the argument, we're going to come to the defense. I'd say if we're going to be professionals at this, we have to consider carefully if they're really worthy, and if it's an idea, if it's an argument you want to defend, it may not be. And so shows like Dapper Dino give insights into maybe what arguments you can make and what not to make. And it may not even be just the argument itself. You might have the argument in the right direction, but you use the wrong words. They will pounce on you for even, just like, when Kent Hovind was talking about the Fibonacci sequence or series being found in spiral galaxies, it's found in some. But if he says all, boy, anytime you say all, you're just opening yourself up to be shot down. And of course, my ear would pick up stuff like that, but a lot of creationists will not see it. There's also like a very subtle, and I'm just trying to give you pointers, guys. This is why it's good to have your arguments reviewed. And if the other side pounces on a word here or there, it's like, okay, you can fix that and say, hey, thank you guys for pointing out, I could have used a better choice of words. That's all you have to say. Kent Hovind had said, so let me just, I took a lot of notes, but there's some subtle things where your argument could fail on a single word. And the other side will be very keen to pick up on it. Kent Hovind said that the mainstream had claimed polio was cured. And that's almost in the right direction, but it's actually quite wrong. Polio was never cured, meaning in the sense people that had polio were never cured of it or the damage it had done to their bodies. What did happen is we had vaccines that prevented people from getting polio. So in a sense, you could say worldwide we had cured the problem of people getting polio, but we didn't, the choice of words that Kent used could be misconstrued. He went on to say, well, polio is obviously not cured. And he thinks that it got relabeled as multiple sclerosis. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so terrible. Because I don't know anyone that thinks that polio got relabeled to be multiple sclerosis. Kent Hovind asserted that polio is never cured and that it became multiple sclerosis. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is exactly why I don't listen to the guy. And I just cringe that anyone wants to, okay, you buy his seminar series and he says some people get college credit for listening to it. And I'm horrified. I mean, it wasn't even just a few minutes into it and he was saying all this stuff. All right. So he was criticizing vaccines. And, sometimes in a short show, and especially, I'm a visitor, I can't explain all the nuances of what I think about vaccines. Like anything, there are benefits and risks, but you can't say that it's all bad. That's what I wanted. Kent is a bit of a mess, yes. But I'll tell you why this concerns me about Kent being a mess. His publicly filed IRS 990s, $500,000 of revenue, not too many expenses. Yeah, polio equals MS. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had to hear it with my own ears to be sure that that was what he was saying. I mean, he didn't say polio equals MS. He was saying that, I, he was saying something about polio being relabeled MS or something. It was so bad I couldn't even process it. But his IRS 990s indicate 500,000 of revenue in 2018. We don't know how much it is now. It could be higher. And I'm like, what are these guys doing that enables them to just draw in crowds, and they're being fed junk like this? Of course, I was just saying, okay, why am I on this show? It's like, well, I want a piece of that pie, and I was being half serious, okay. Um, but I was saying, well, I wanted to thank Dapper Dino for, if he's pounding down Kent Hovind, he's kind of elevating me up. And of course, I was being half serious. Okay, guys, I hope that was clear. I was saying that, and there are. I think Eric Hovind, unfortunately, is recycling a lot of his father's stuff, and I can't say that explicitly. I've heard some things of Eric. It's not quite as bad, but some of it's a little. It's like I definitely wouldn't go there. And Eric has also filed a IRS 990, and he's making about 500,000 on this. And they're like, what are these guys doing? And I think, sadly, it doesn't have. It's not based on the rigor of their scientific arguments. That's for sure. Now, again, I haven't watched that much of Eric, so I want to go easy on him. And greetings to Andrew Graham. So there are some things. It's like, well, I didn't quite know how to handle it when they wanted to say bad things about AIG, and they said, "Let's take a drink," and I did. Maybe next time I won't, because I do want to respect AIG a little bit, that they're not quite as bad as Dapper Dino makes them out to be. Although for those who are part of the Creation Ministries International, they probably feel that way. There are some, not every creationist has been happy with the way Ken Ham has handled things, and some of those wounds are still deep. I still remember that. So, guys, if you're offended by what I did when I sipped, I think next time I don't have to participate in that. I could be quietly assertive, and so I apologize if I offended people. So, what were things that I agreed with and disagreed with? Kent said Satan wants to reduce the population, and I'm like, well, I'll cover that a little more, but it's like I have not read that in the Bible. And what's the point of putting this in an advanced creationism seminar? So it is, true. Jesus said Satan's been a murderer, a liar, and a murderer. So, I don't know what to make of that, but I know where he was trying to go with it, but there are probably better ways. So I'll just skip that. Kent quoted someone called Howard Ernovitz, and he claims that HIV is a monkey hybrid virus, which Dapper said is correct. But they said that this is that polio vaccines had HIV in them. Polio vaccines had HIV in them. In fact, let me put it in my notes here. Polio vaccines had HIV in them. All right. I just like, whoa. And Dapper Dino made a very good takedown of that theory that polio vaccines had HIV in them. I took a polio vaccine, and so did Kent Hovind. I'm just like, well, I don't think you could make the case that polio vaccines had HIV in them, because HIV, at least in the 80s, when it came to the, kind of the public consciousness, it was associated with the activity of gay men. So um, the question is, with all these people taking polio vaccines, why didn't they get HIV? So I'm just pointing that out. And I covered about Kent misstating uh, that polio was claimed to be cured. And again, this is a little bit of semantics. So and let's see. Okay, it is conceivable that polio and HIV share some common DNA sequences, but I seriously doubt that polio vaccines spread HIV, given HIV didn't really exist until long after polio vaccines was developed. Okay, so this is again, um, when you're making an outrageous claim like that, you better try to back it up with at least some stronger references, and at least post the references. So in a lot of Kent's slides, it was pretty sloppy. And so sometimes, people can um, just be beaten down with all the references and all the detail I go um, into my streams. That part of it is because I'm making outrageous claims and it's not common knowledge, it goes against the mainstream. I have to work a little extra harder to try to make my case and make my points. And that's why I have these nerd torture sessions. And so that's just a little critique there. And sometimes in the process, you realize you might be wrong. So this whole thing about polio being MS, I don't know where he got that. And maybe if there were a little due diligence. And I'm just saying, this is what makes me cringe. And so I was really glad I was on the show. I mean, I knew what Kent, some of the stuff was saying was bad, but I didn't realize it was that bad. Kent argues that pasteurization is bad for milk. So pasteurized milk, he's arguing, is a bad thing. And I heard a new word called Luddite. I don't know what a Luddite is. Someone in the side chat said that. Okay, I'm just reading from my notes here about my experience. Hey, Emory, would you like to come on to talk? Are you free? Since you're here, we can talk about other things too. Shoot the breeze for a little bit because I had a pretty heavy day. Kent talked about the vaccine autism connection. Okay, so let me send Emory an invite. And I'm sorry, brother, this is on Restream, and I know you have computer problems with Restream, but it would still, if you can connect, I would be honored, sir. So I'm right now bringing up my email, and I'm composing a letter, and it's loading. It's taking forever to load. And so Emory, and I'm saying Restream link, and there you go. And I'm sending it. Yeah, me and Restream. I have some problems with StreamYard on this computer. So, okay, the autism connection with vaccines. This is, at best, this is weak. It's almost definitely wrong. And at the very least, at a young Earth creationist university like Liberty, I was in on a biology lecture by Andrew Fabich, and he said, get the vaccines, because he was describing the immune system. And there is a correlation between autism and pregnant mothers having fevers. So if, let's say, a pregnant mother contracts the flu, gets a bad fever, she increases the risk of her child getting autism. So, you know, um, why go there? Why go on a campaign that all vaccines are bad? You know, I was grateful that I lived in an era I didn't have to worry about contracting polio. and I'm grateful I was able to take flu vaccines because I get very, very sick. I've had 1,000 immunizations for allergies. And when I had gotten, before I started taking them, life was just miserable. And um, I got really bad allergies, and that just kind of wore me down. And I think I got sick, got pneumonia, all sorts of things. I got a lot healthier by taking the allergy injections. Um, Certainly, when when I was going overseas, I had to be immunized for things like typhoid and cholera. I was glad I got a smallpox vaccine. So there are risks. There are definitely risks, but there's risk in driving a car. So yeah, it could be nuanced, but it's like you don't say it's all bad because you could make the same argument for cars. So Emory is here. Emory, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Praise
Hey,
God.
praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord. Someone's working really hard through grad school because it's like you fall off the map every now and then. And
The last two
is your
months of my
semester
life have been
over?
two of the busiest. So I actually
Wow.
got a, and I'm gonna. I haven't responded to it yet because again I've been too busy. But I actually got a very nice email from Dr. Cardinal asking if I was okay, basically because I wasn't posting anything. So, um, but no, I am okay. I'm hating my existence, but that's what I get for picking the thesis option for my graduate studies. So, you know.
Yeah, I didn't have a thesis option. Um, I didn't take at my particular program. There was no thesis, which I was grateful for. So, so do you have any more? Do you have any final exams to look forward
No.
to?
Okay, so I am done with final exams. I shouldn't have to take one again for this class, and I didn't even have to take one this semester. I wrote a paper for the one class I took. Basically, my only exams left at this point are writing my thesis, which is either going to be done this semester or next. I don't know exactly. This coming semester or the following semester. I don't know yet. We're still working all the details out on that, but
Well, just for those who may be watching the stream, later, most of the people here live know who you are. But Emory, say a little bit about yourself for the people
sure.
that may be watching us.
Sure. So, the first thing you should know about me is I obviously hate my existence because I picked a graduate program that requires a thesis. Um, we'll start with that. So, my name is Emory Moynagh. It's a pseudonym, but a lot of people on the internet use a pseudonym. It shouldn't surprise anybody. I have a channel in his image and a blog in hisimage.blog. I haven't really posted on either one of them for the last 2 months because I've been between being sick and being buried under graduate school work. I just haven't had time to record anything. But I should be back to recording. I sent Sal an email last night telling him that, so I should be back to recording soonish, Lord willing, fingers crossed. But yeah, so that's me, graduate student in biology, looking into PhD programs because I obviously hate myself and really want to torture myself for some reason. Um, but at any rate, so that's me. You can check out all my links to stuff if you want or whatever. That's great. Feel free to subscribe for stuff that's for okay. So if you like, I'm just going to warn you. If you like Sal, you probably won't like me. Um, because I'm Sal is the good cop. I'm the bad cop. So
I'm gonna right now just look for in his image, and I'm gonna put it um, in. I'm gonna put that in the video description right
okay,
now.
thank you,
Um,
thank you.
so um, I mean, there's a point when I hear stuff and it's so bad I just don't want to listen. But
Mm-hmm.
I said this time I'm going to go to Dapper Dinos because sometimes there are things I have to tell you, and I bravo to him. There are things that I learn when I hear him. I learn about the other
Mm-hmm.
arguments, and I'm like, wow, I'm really glad I visited. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe for the interlockers that are just looking for, they're in that phase where they just want creationism and just want to hear that side because they've been
Mhm.
beaten down and they want to, they want encouragement. I get that.
Yeah.
But at the professional level, we're the ones developing kind of the arsenal of arguments. We have to do this.
Mhm.
And so people wonder, it's like, how am I going to build the arsenal if I'm not in the battlefield?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and and sometimes the guys will give you really good stuff that you have to think about, because this is, if you go off to university, this is what you're going to face. And you already may know some of the answers to this, but apparently Dapper Dino, and I'm presuming he got part of this from Dr. Dan, was talking about the crossover rate in recombination. I'm just like that, you know, I never heard that argument before. And, you know, um, uh, when they're talking about created heterozygosity and I'm just like, yeah, Dr. Dan's pretty sharp. This is something I've not heard. There've been times I got something from Jeff Tompkins when I was at the ICR. And even though I'm sympathetic to it, Dr. Dan said, well, it's not quite as good as you think. And I had to agree with him, and he came here. And
Mhm.
so this is what we have to do as professionals or aspiring professionals, um,
Mhm.
to prosecute the case for creationism. It's we're not going to go to a steady diet of just hearing all the good stuff that creationism has. We actually have to, our responsibility is to look at the weak arguments and try to make them stronger, or actually dispense with them.
Mhm.
If you have some thoughts while I'm doing some admin things, Emory.
Well, no, I would in part agree with you. I mean, I don't think that I don't won't go as far as you, where to me, I don't think that the other side has to agree that it's a good argument in order for it to be a good argument. Sometimes the fact that they disagree tells me it's a good argument. Particularly when they disagree with something that then forces them into a position where they have to contradict themselves. But I do think that it is helpful to hear opinions from multiple sides. Like I listen to opinions from creationists, but I also read extensively in the peer-reviewed literature for the very simple reason that I want to understand things. And this maybe this is a character flaw, but I do not want to understand something at a surface level. Like I do not want to understand, okay, this is how it works. I want to know why. I don't just want to know, okay, you do this, and you get this result. That's wonderful. Why do you get that result? What drives the process? Well, if this is this will kind of talk a little bit about my thesis. So I'm using genetic diversity data as part of my thesis. And my advisor essentially told me, don't worry about how they get the data. That'll just take you extra time that you don't need. Just get the data. And I said, okay, that's fine. Whatever. You're the advisor. You do what I do what you tell me. Well, I decided that on my own time, I'm going to figure out how and why they derive the data, because it's driving me insane that I don't know and I don't understand, because then I can't check the assumptions. I can't check whether this is applicable for a particular situation if I don't know why. And so, unfortunately, a lot of what gets presented in creationist material outside the technical journals is very much how and not why. It's more of a surface level argument, which those arguments are being addressed towards lay church people, not professional scientists. So I get why they do that. That's not a problem. I like different target audience. You tailor towards your target audience. I get that. But at the same time, for me, as someone who is a nerd, rather large one, I don't just want the okay, this is how. I want to know, okay, why does this produce this particular results? Anyways, I've rambled on long enough. I'll let you pick it up, Sal.
I was just I was updating the video description to have your,
Thank you.
yes, and just briefly, uh, I need to try to at least show the thumbnail
Mm-hmm.
in the show, because I don't want stuff to be clickbait.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's if ends up being inadvertent. Sometimes I miss it. Anyway, I was just grabbing this book. I've not read it. Um, Changing Minds by Howard Gardner, The
Mm-hmm.
Art and Science of Changing Our Own and Other People's Minds. And really, the only reason I picked that as a thumbnail is that I like having just good arguments,
Mm-hmm.
and you may or may not be able to change people's minds in the process. So I just wanted to explain why I
Right.
picked that. If people see the thumbnail, it's like, what does that have to do with what you're talking about?
Right.
And
And
so as I was saying, I'm building the arsenal, and I really do think there are some arguments where um, they'll actually agree with us, and sometimes I'm very sensitive to noticing when they don't want to talk about something.
mm-hmm.
Because like when Joe DeWeese and the Discovery Institute released their Topaz Som race videos, it's like I didn't hear any credible rebuttals. Just like, okay, I want to do more of that. And the other thing is we shouldn't make it too easy for the other side to misrepresent us. And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the choice of words, it's like, yeah, don't expect that you're going to get a charitable reading of what you say.
Charitable reading is something you probably shouldn't expect from creationists, let alone from evolutionists.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not saying we go overboard on trying to defend everything, but there have been people that have been successful and you don't realize it. Like Change Tan and Rob Stadler's book Stairway to Life. You don't hear you don't hear anywhere near the negative stuff on theirs compared to other creationists. And it's like, okay, that I people have asked me, what's your favorite creationist ID book? I said for ID, definitely Stairway to Life. And I don't know if have you read it or have
I
you
have
seen
not had an opportunity yet. It came out while I was in grad school. I haven't had a chance.
it?
It is on my list. I have a list of about 30 books I want to read right now, and it's close to the top.
All right, so I don't know if there's anyone that came over from Dapper Dino's channel. By the way, greetings, Alyosha and Andrew Graham, and all the others. If I missed anyone, apologies in advance. And I was saying, okay, on my channel, I'm going to discuss a little bit of creationism done right. And the first thing is I'd just start with intelligent design and assume the mainstream viewpoints just for the sake of argument. And then you could see the intelligent design of life. Because I've often said ID is easy, YEC is hard. ID is easy relative to defending young Earth creationism. I'm just saying from uh, the viewpoint of science and how many arguments you have to deal with. Just the sheer volume of difficulty of prosecuting young Earth creationism is so much more difficult than just saying, hey, look, the cell is designed
Mm-hmm.
and life is a miracle. That's very comparatively easy to trying to account for distant starlight and the problems with radioactive decay and radiometric dating. Um, and then some of the stuff with Noah's flood, because it's hard. It's hard. So I'd say creationism is done right. Is you start with intelligent design, and 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 there are lots of videos, and I found people, once they see that, they become a little more open. So, and this goes for either non-Christians or Christians who are kind of on the fence about these issues. So that's what for anyone who's watching this who came over to this channel because they saw me on Dapper Dinos, that's what I had to say. That's creationism done right. You don't have to try to prove young Earth creationism. You need to point out. You have to make the case that it's probably more credible than the mainstream is saying, and you don't have to say that it's proven at this point because there's a lot of things in the Christian faith you can't prove, uh, at least not immediately. But then something if evidence starts to come in later, and that's what I would just say, because if you're in such a rush to try to prove it, you start making up bad arguments, and
Mm-hmm.
that can be more damaging long term because then
I think it's more
someone
damaging to you long term too, because like if you throw together a half-baked argument that you think, oh, this will answer the question, it's going to be nagging in the back of your brain too. Say, well, I don't know if that argument's very good. And unless you actually go and investigate it, you're never going to have a solid answer. And if something sits and sticks in the back of your mind for a long time, it can really do a lot of damage.
Yeah. Patrick Alexander said Dapper Stream is pretty respectful. Really, it generally was because of the topic. Maybe if I came in on a topic they were talking specifically about young Earth, it'd be difficult for me. But it was Provident. They're talking about just kind of basic stuff like vaccines and all. So I had a chance to say, hey, this is exactly why I've opposed young Earth creationists going to Kent Hovind. I mean, I wouldn't, this does not reflect well on Christianity, on Christian, students that are Christians and going off the science. It doesn't reflect well on creationism. I mean, you could have opinions and all, but at least, you can have controversial opinions, but try to defend it a little bit more logically and with evidence than saying stuff like polio got relabeled to multiple sclerosis. Come on. So, anyway, and I don't know about this pasteurization is bad. I'm game for seeing the alternate viewpoint about not having pasteurization, but that's fair game.
Right. And like pasteurization was never really about the nutrient content of the milk. It was always about how long can we make this stuff last so that it doesn't spoil. Like the whole point of pasteurization was milk was spoiling incredibly quickly. It was actually mostly for wine before it was used for milk, but
okay.
It was spoiling too fast, and they weren't interested so much in the nutrient content. Is can we keep this stuff on ship for 6 months and not have it spoil?
Oh, and it just occurred to me, isn't pasteurization, it's almost, you're just heating something up. You eat food, you cook it.
Essentially, I would say that the reason they would be arguing about the nutrient content was the possibility of probiotic bacteria. That's probably, and I'm saying probably because I don't listen to Hovind spew his dribble anymore.
Yeah, I can't say that it's inherently bad to have pasteurized milk. I mean, we have all sorts of preservatives and, there are downsides to that, but it's like, well, your food is more affordable or whatever. You can't, I wouldn't go on it. I think what you could say is it has benefits and maybe some risks. And that's the fair thing to say. You just don't say that it's just outrightly bad. I mean, that if I were going to try to say that, I'd make something more temperate.
If you're going to say that it's outright bad, you'd better bring a truckload of evidence along with you.
Yeah.
If you can bring that truckload of evidence, bring it. Like I'm not going to say that if you can bring me a truckload of evidence that says it's bad, I won't change my mind. But you better bring me a truckload of evidence.
Right. So this is just again my thought. We had just a little more thoughtfulness and temperance in our words. We can convey our concerns without, being irresponsible. We could say there are benefits to pasteurization. There could be some risks, and that's fair. But again, the reason you want to be that way is you're not going to get a charitable reading of anything or hearing of anything you say in just a little bit of, a little caveat emptor or just some temperate words. This is going to help you. Oh my goodness. Dr. Dan is here.
Yeah, Dr. Dan.
So
I'm Dr. Dan. I am going to apologize that I haven't had a chance to respond to your email. I literally turned in my draft as of tonight. So, and I still am waiting on part of my draft to come back from my mentor. So, thank you for the email. Content is going to resume at some point, but I'm okay. Thank you for asking.
If you wanted to say something more to Dr. Dan, you can. I'm going to grab some more cranberry ginger ale. I'll
Oh,
be right back.
all right. So yes, but yeah, no, I thank you. I appreciate you checking in. Um, Lord willing, I should be back to making content in the next week and a half, 2 weeks. It depends on the email that I'm gonna hopefully get back from my mentor at some point in the near-ish future. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah. um, Graduate school, man. I and the, you know, the, and Dr. Dan, you know what I'm talking about when I say this because you've been through this, but you you when you set up a project, sometimes you bite off a little more than you can chew, and I think it's kind of what I did.
Okay, so Dr. Dan, I don't know if you watched Dapper Dino's show, but we caught Kent saying that polio vaccines had HIV in them. I don't think that's true, and that polio got relabeled to be multiple sclerosis.
Yeah, that's
Um,
crackpot. And
uh,
whoever, and I know somebody who gets very upset when I say that Hovind is a crackpot, so I'll say it again. Hovind is a crackpot.
okay, people are like, okay, I got to point out something. People get upset with me and say, you're attacking a fellow Christian brother. I'm just like, it says in Proverbs, a wise man will love you if you correct him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, guys, you know, you don't know how damaging this can be. If you're trying to raise the next generation of creationists and Christians, this is not good. This is absolutely not good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, so since we have a virologist here,
Yeah.
praise the Lord for you, Dr. Dan. Uh,
Yeah. See,
that
he
was
knows a
one
lot more
theory
about
of
this
how
than I do.
HIV spread in humans, but HIV made the jump like in made the jump in like the 1930s, and polio vaccines weren't developed until a decade. So no.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I know, It doesn't. It really doesn't. And I don't even have the virology. There's the word virology background. Like, I stay well away from well away from virology. I prefer things that I can actually, understand their reproductive cycle. But it just no,
okay,
just no.
yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
Brain Bug, you missed it. I don't know if you heard. I was on Dapper Dino's channel, and they were doing the Kent with Bent show, and we were reviewing when Kent said uh, the polio vaccine had HIV in it, and that polio got relabeled to be, polio was never cured. It just got relabeled to be multiple sclerosis. So, okay. Anyway, we won't belabor this too much. So, um, Kent was arguing for the vaccine autism connection, and I pointed out Andrew Fabich, a name I think you might be familiar with, Emory.
Yes, I'm familiar with Dr. Fabish.
Yes, he used to be at Liberty University, and it's not true at McConnell. He's a microbiologist published in Nature, or his work is referenced by Nature papers, so that's good. Uh, he may not have been actually published in Nature, but his work was featured in Nature indirectly that way. And I sat in on a microbiology class, or no, immunology. He's talking about, it was a biology class, but he's talking about immunizations. He said pregnant women who have fevers there may be an incident increase of autism in their children. The trauma
Mm-hmm.
may not be just the fever, but they got very, very sick, like say with the flu.
Right,
And he
right.
said it's good for the mothers then to get the flu vaccine to prevent them from getting the flu. And so he's encouraging it. So it's Kent Hovind is kind of on the fringe, even among the young Earth community.
Yeah.
That being said, there are risks with vaccines, and um, Kent did mention something about diphtheria vaccines. There's someone in my church who nearly died. He stopped breathing after he got a diphtheria vaccine, and so there are certain diseases you got to be. It's like, do you really want this vaccine? There has been some concern of the anthrax vaccine among some soldiers. I'm working with a woman now who, uh, you know, she probably suffered Gulf War syndrome. She might be vulnerable to the anthrax vaccine. So there's some vaccines that I definitely take, like the flu vaccine, because I get very sick. I've taken thousands of immunizations. So I reject the autism connection. Even if it's there, it would have to be very small, and it can't account for the large increase in autism. And Dapper Dino said this could be because they've redefined what autism is. And oh my goodness, Mats is here. All sorts of people. Long time no see, brother. So let's see what else. He talked about sudden infant death syndrome in Australia. And then, okay, so this is a creationism seminar. And so this is the one time I was kind of sympathetic. And I didn't know how to communicate it during the show, but toward the end, I had to say, well, I kind of agree with about the thing about the Masons being satanic, and then also the concern about the one world government. And I just left it at that. But I had to say, just because I nodded my head during the show, it means I acknowledge what I'm hearing. Doesn't mean I agree.
Mm-hmm.
So I just didn't want to be rude. So that was mostly it. Dapper Dino talked about this. And while we have Dr. Dan here, this crossover, recombination crossover, and Noah's flood. That was very interesting. That the recombination rates don't agree. The necessary recombination or crossover rates that would have to be achieved don't agree with observations. Was that your argument, Dr. Dan? If you're there.
He's there, but he's chatting away in the side chat. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I said, bravo, and there was something called the spiral vortex. Did I have it here about, let's see if I have it. Okay, so there was something. Oh yeah, it's called the extinction vortex and the extinction spiral. Okay, so all right, so I had a feeling this was. I think this may have come from. I'm crediting you, Dr. Dan, with that argument, and I told Dapper Dino, thank you, that was good. And then there's this thing I've never heard of, the extinction vortex and extinction spiral.
Okay, so I actually have heard of those things.
Okay.
Basic, and this is from like 2 semesters ago, so like bear with me if it's particularly Dr. Dan, if I misstate something, bear with me, but this is my memory of it from a couple of years ago. Basically what happens is a species can get into a situation where bad just compounds bad and it gets worse and worse. It's usually associated with genetic deterioration, but it can be associated with other factors as well. Reproductive rate, that sort of thing. Again, this is vague memory. So Dr. Dan, if I'm messing something up on this, please feel free to correct me. But basically it's just, you can get into this hole where a species will literally spiral into extinction, and there's not a whole lot that can be done about it because of its, because of usually genetic factors, but again, other factors can play into that as well.
All right, so I'm almost done with all the Kent Hovind bashing. Okay, I wanted to credit Kent he pointed out there's a Fibonacci sequence in galaxies. And again, this is where we have to be careful that we don't, with our choice of words, lest we get hammered by an uncharitable reading. It's fair to say it exists in some spiral galaxies. I don't know that we can argue it exists in all. And so we just have to be careful about that. And I think Kent actually got something right about Fibonacci in music. I'm not 100% sure, but a cursory Google showed this was it's possible. So hang on, I have to answer a message to Emory.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought.
All right. So yeah, Dr. Dan, there's tons of things we have to explore. I did talk to Dr. Jeanson, and he said a response is coming, but his priority is for the popular press. And I said, Dr. Jeanson, I got graduate students that want to hear from you. He said, okay, sometime it's coming. All right, so that's the. So Dr. Dan, I did put in a good word for you. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what I disagreed with. I do think I am very concerned about the Masons and kind of these secret organizations or these clubs. You know, especially being somewhat sensitive to theology. I think there's some sketchy stuff with the Masons, and so Dapper Dino was dismissing it, but I think it's probably a lot more sinister organization. So, what do you have any thoughts?
I do not know enough to comment intelligently, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
Okay. So that was.
I try to stick to biology.
All right. So, you know, anything that has these that doesn't. I guess the way I look at it is when they're, you know, these things that talk about it's almost like a philosophy, and it's Christian sounding, but it doesn't appeal to the scriptures. My radar starts to go, you know, it's like this. I'm a little concerned. So that's just what I thought. So, all right. So we'll just move on then. So this whole thing, Kent was talking about the Georgia guide stones. And I'm like, okay, first off, what does this have to do with creationism? But there are some things that have come out with the Great Reset. So, in defense of Kent, which I don't do much, but I just want to be a little bit fair here. If this seminar series came out a few years ago or several years, he may not have had the best up-to-date stuff. But there's this thing called the Georgia Guidestones. And I think he's trying to make a point, but I think there's a way to make it a little bit more forcefully. And I'm actually, if I can get copyright releases, I'm going to try to cover some of this with a globalism. So, so this was the Guidestones built in 1980, a set of guidelines inscribed on the structure of modern languages, and a shorter message is inscribed on top of the structure in 4 ancient scripts. And he was saying this had pagan stuff and it's satanic. And I'm like, well, you know, in Christian theology, a lot of things that are kind of ecumenical, Orthodox Christian theology would say, yeah, that is not of the Lord. It is it would be heresy if it's passed off as Christianity. So, but the thing it said here, it said maintain humanity under 500,000 in perpetual balance with nature, guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity, unite humanity with a living new language. So on and so forth. But there is a more disturbing trend. Regents University had a conference on globalism, and my heart just sunk. I said, this looks like the prophecies in the book of Revelation of the end of the world, where we have a one world government and they're forcing people, they'll have what they call your social credit rating. If you're not, if your political views don't align with what the government likes, and it'll be enforced through corporations. And there are chips that are being developed that could be inserted in your forehead or your right hand, and you can't buy or sell without it, with the digital currencies. And, when I first heard this, my heart was really just sinking. And so I don't minimize the threat of what's going on. The whole thing about population control and climate change could be a means of just for greedy powers to start to limit freedoms and take more control. So, I mean, I'm all for conservation, but I might be showing some shows on this on my channel. If I can get copyright releases of like Bill Federer talking about these things. So, and I know that I'm probably going to offend a lot of people when I cover this, but for those of us that it says we're in the last days, and it's been saying that for the last 2,000 years. And I'm not trying to assign numbers, but I think the technology and the infrastructure for the Antichrist coming on Earth, it's starting. The stage is starting to get set. That's my feeling. If you had any thoughts on this.
I have a lot of thoughts, but I am not going to go down that rabbit hole tonight.
Okay, that's fine.
Because, first of all, this wasn't quite where I was expecting to go, and second, I don't. I think this is a conversation you and I should have off air before we have it on air.
Oh, okay. Hey, that's fine. I just wanted people to know where I stand.
And just for the record, I don't disagree with a lot of what you said, but I want to, I think, maybe walk through a few things, maybe just talk and give you some resources too before we go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah. And okay, so if people wonder, how did I get involved in this? Well, I am very all right, just as a citizen, I am very concerned about our freedoms being limited. I'm concerned about, even more immediate concerns about being deplatformed. I am concerned about how I see economic mismanagement. I was concerned about prisoners being released on the excuse of COVID. This is all very like, okay, what's going on here? And so we could take it all the way to the biblical prophecy thing, but we could also take it on the other angle. It's like there's certain things economically and politically that are just like, I'm fearful for the next generation. So because theology and everyone disagrees with eschatology anyway. I think
Eschatology.
we could have that conversation about theology, but I think you and I kind of are on the same page as far as the concerns, about the
Mhm.
culture changing and
Mhm.
kind of melting down. Um,
Yeah.
okay, we're on the same page.
Yeah, no, you're not going to get too many arguments from me that culture is kind of falling apart. And this is not just a Christian thing to point out the culture's falling apart. The culture in the United States is shredding at the seams and becoming very, very split. So it's very hard to agree
Yeah.
with people who have opposing views and find common ground. It used to be you could do that. It's becoming much, much harder to do that anymore, and that indicates that the culture is starting to come apart at the seams.
Yeah. So, I would be, I would like to actually to look a little bit more at what Dapper Dino has to say about phylogenetics and baraminology, and he was criticizing Kurt Wise. So before I close the show, the I'm preparing a presentation on my explanation for the nested hierarchies in molecular biology, and I'm tying it to the I'm saying that there is a hidden code in biology that predicts three-dimensional structures in proteins and RNAs. And if you create such a code, it'll create patterns of diversity that will automatically create nested hierarchies. So what has been interpreted as evidence of evolution, I think the better argument is the pattern, the nested hierarchy is a consequence of the embedded code that's optimized for scientific discovery. For those of you who would like to meet me, I'm planning, if the powers that be of the Creation Research Society allow me, I plan to make a presentation just on that topic. But you don't have to go there to hear the presentation because I have to do a rehearsal here. But just in case you want to meet me personally, the other thing I'd like to say is I got a hold of Philip Dennis, who's the top young Earth creationist in special and general relativity. He's tops because he's worked for NASA. He's published in the Physical Review Letters, which is the top physics journal in the world, and he's member of the American Physical Society, which is the top organization in the U.S. There is one in Germany that is definitely a rival. So Philip Dennis and I are going to be making a series on special and general relativity, and also with in mind of actually criticizing other young Earth theories. We're going to try to do it as politely as we can, but we are disagreeing with Jason Lyle's asynchrony convention and one-way speed of light, and also Russell Humphrey's uh, starlight in time theory. And they're about 13, 14 yet cosmologies. So I'm excited about that. And and for those, if I have done shows on heavy electron quasi-particles and the solution to radiometric dating problems, and that's an alternative to the heat problem that keeps popping up in especially in internet forums. And I also in the last month found out evidence the Big Bang could be wrong based on uh, an experiment with Pioneer 6 where the radio waves went through the solar corona and got redshifted. This is really bad for the Big Bang. And that paper only came out in 2021. So much is happening, and I couldn't put it down. And I got inspired. I said, hey, I'm doing all of this stuff kind of as a hobby, but I could probably get college credits for doing this. So I have received a blessing from. I've received very strong interest from one university to enter a PhD program. I'm going to try for 2023 if I can find a way to finance it without having to sell my house. So those are just kind of my announcements, and so there could be a lot of fun on this channel as I prepare for that. And Emory actually was my inspiration for also thinking about a PhD program. So I'm about ready to shut the stream down.
Fun.
If you had any thoughts, brother.
Not in particular. I mean, I'm in the same position you are, trying to figure out how to finance a PhD. Slap myself in the face. Let's just put it this way, folks. There are not very many PhD programs that are fully online, and the ones that are like incredibly expensive. Like to the like, unless you are fairly affluent to start with. Well, Brainbug, we could also say there's no line to draw between species either. So let's not go down that road, shall we? But they're incredibly expensive, and because of that, it makes it very difficult to, unless you're going to go through the traditional university route where you get paid peanuts to teach undergraduate classes. It's not. It's very difficult for you to do.
Well, thank you for joining, and maybe we didn't have like our usual really long streams and in-depth stuff. And besides, I'm really tired. This is like the fourth meeting today. My car had broken down, the window wouldn't work, and so that was a $570 repair. And so I did streams today. Oh, one interesting thing. I have to, and I'm glad to make this announcement. I've been talking about eukaryotic evolution being impossible. I have to nuance that, and I knew I should have, because there are eukaryotic-like features where most, kind of the general characteristics of eukaryotes, like chromatin and membrane-bound organelles, that I think are indicative of miraculous special creation. But I tended to frame it as eukaryotic evolution. And I don't know if you knew this, Emory, that we found a bacteria that could be like 2 centimeters long, and it has 500,000 copies of DNA in it that are put in membrane-bound organelles, not in the center. So I don't think you would call it a nucleus, but it's at the edge of the cellular membrane. This is a weird organism. And so they said, the first thing they said is this could be the missing link between prokaryotes and eukaryotes. And that, now it's blurring the distinction between prokaryotes and eukaryotes because it has that membrane-bound DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say there are some problems about saying that it is a missing link, because a lot of biologists have said we're more similar to archaea,
mm-hmm.
the eukaryotes.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to pick which of the two prokaryotes you'd go with, is it going to be bacteria or archaea? So this architecture was found in bacteria. So this just kind of makes it, I don't think this will be that good of an argument that it's a missing link. But it does blurs the distinction between eukaryote and prokaryote because of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was about to release a video and a discussion on the difficulty of eukaryotic evolution, but in light of this, and this only got published in like the last 2 months. I mean, it's been sort of known, but you know how it is before they officially publish something. I'm going to have to amend my argument a little bit and say that there are systems that are difficult to evolve rather than entire organisms, and that's going to be an easier argument to make. And then I also threw out the idea that there are some things that are, where do you find granularity where there's not going to be a gradual transition from one thing to another. It's
Mhm.
usually at the protein level and at the systems level, and then we go really down to it, it's even at the molecular level.
Mhm.
So I just thought I'd mention that discovery of that, and I have
Yeah,
a
that's it. That's
stream on it
interesting.
today. Yeah, Dr. Duff was in here when I was talking about that. He said, "Yeah, that's really, really interesting.
Yeah,
Two
that's something
centimeter
I
long
haven't heard
bacteria."
very much about, but I'd definitely be interested in.
Yeah. So I that was the earlier stream today, and that's pretty much all I had. So I can meet you backstage, and
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
dead tired. I'd like to thank everyone who came to visit, and we'll talk again. So um, take care, you all, and God bless you.